Good afternoon and good gardening. This is show number 7, and it's entitled Planting with Straw and Paper. I'm your Professor David Giles. Here is my assistant, Wookie the Wonder Dog, over here on the right. You can see a poster in front of you that's going to outline the steps of what we're going to be doing today. Excuse me, Wookie the Wonder Dog. Yes, don't sneeze at the microphone. We're also going to be planting some carrots and some radishes. Step 1 that we're going to be covering is plant seed on top of bare bed, but cut slots in the paper to place over the seed. Now this is good for some seed, but not others. Really small seeds like carrots, you need to actually cut little boxes, not just slots. If you're doing bedding plants, you can cut holes in the top of it, put the plant down through it, or you can run 2 parallel rows of paper next to one another and plant along the crease. Then using yard staples, you put down the paper and the plants. Well, we don't have any bedding plants to put down today because it's too early to plant them, but we are going to be planting some seed. Then the last step we have is to put hay down over the paper. That'll hold in moisture and make the garden look real pretty. Okay, so we moved the shot here. We're going to be working in these last 3 rows of the garden. This one I'm not planting yet, but I am going to put down paper. These two I'm going to put down seed and then paper over the top of it. But before we do that, we want to work in a couple of things. Hopefully you had some manure that you can put down in your garden. If you didn't, you didn't. My garden did not get manure this year, but it's gotten it several years past. I have another garden on the other side that will be getting manure this year, and I'm going to let it go fallow. I'm having a bad problem with Johnson grass, and you can't really kill Johnson grass and grow a garden at the same time. You can do one or the other because it's a really tough weed to get rid of. So I'm going to concentrate this year on killing off the Johnson grass on the other side, putting down manure to make it more loam. And next year, that garden will be prime. This year, this garden's prime now. It's one we're going to be working with all season. Right now, I'm putting down perlite. Perlite helps put air into the soil, and it's a good thing to mix in whenever you're planting, at least some. The other thing I'm going to be putting down today is pelletized calcium limestone for gardening. That sweetens the soil. I guarantee if it's been a while since you put down lime, it's gone back to being acid again. So you want to put down some lime. I can mix this stuff in while you're tilling up the soil. I spent a couple of days digging out roots before we got to this point. That's a good idea. Get as many roots out of that ground as possible. Guarantee you won't get all of them. And every one of them will grow up with a vengeance. You'll be having to pull them up in the summertime. Put down your pelletized lime, put down your perlite. Grab your handy little hoe, work it in a little bit. Now, all of my tools have metal handles. I got tired of the wooden ones breaking. And so I had my son weld on these, and they tend to last really well. If you know a welder, get rid of that wood, put in metal. I do have a couple of tools that are exceptions. I have a pitchfork that has a wooden handle that I just put on there. We ran out of metal. And some of the tools that are helpful to have are a couple of different hoes, one sharp, one flat, shovel, of course, a garden rake, a pitchfork, a coal shovel. You'd be amazed at how helpful a coal shovel is in gardening. Throwing large quantities of whatever into the garden, compost or other things you wind up using throughout the year. Okay, so we worked in the perlite, worked in the calcium. We have a barrel full of newspapers over here. Got a rubber mallet. Got some fabric pins and some U-shaped sticker things. We're going to start putting down paper over this row. This one will be planted later, but we still want to think about how we want it for planting time. In this case, I'm going to leave a space in the middle. I can put the plants in later. I have a little box to help me out with things in the middle. Also, couldn't find any of these fabric pins when I went to my nursery the other day. Just about everything that is worth having, you have to make a trip into the city. And I live pretty far out in the country. So these will help substitute for those larger stakes. Something to hold it down in the middle. Now by putting the crease in the middle like this, I can pull back this crease when I'm ready to plant and then put the paper back right around it. That whole operation down a little bit. Another stake. You want the paper to go all the way across without any space in between. It's got to be held down well enough to keep the wind and the rain from blowing it away. If you're using newspaper like me, you want to leave it folded. One layer will not do. It's going to take more than one. See how I overlap a little bit? This technique was introduced to me by my girlfriend last year, Deborah Black. I credit her with changing my mind about it. I've never liked the idea of using paper over the garden before, but her results convinced me that it works better than my method. You always be open-minded to change. Somebody can show you a way of doing it better, and she did. Thanks a lot, Deborah. Hope you're watching. At any rate, I've selected a couple of different kinds of carrots today. Multicolored carrots, short, fat ones. I don't really like the long, skinny carrots because they tend to be hard to dig out of the ground. And most people have clay soils. They don't grow real deep if you have a clay soil. So you're better off buying a short, fat carrot in the first place. Be planting those momentarily. After we put down a little paper over here. Just want to get started, show you how this works. Probably won't do the whole row because that would get boring. And this show's boring enough already. I have plenty of time to do the whole garden later off camera. Just want to get enough of it done to show you the step. Okay, we're going to pretend we finished this entire row here. Sean, give us a cut. Okay, and put some paper down here. Next step is going to be put hay over it. I wouldn't worry real much if the staples don't seem enough. By the time you get wet hay down on this thing, it's not going to matter. How thick do you put down the hay? Depends on how big a garden you got. The bigger the garden, the thinner you're going to have to make the hay unless you buy a lot of hay. Be careful not to lose your tools while you're doing this part. Or cover the row that you haven't started on yet. Okay. All this will compact flat to the ground anyway. It does make for kind of hazardous walking on this paper when you first get started, to watch your step. Okay, gonna walk it down a little bit. This is my watering hole here. Allows me to put a hose up here and water from on high rather than down low, covering the whole area more evenly like rainfall. Okay. So that row's pretty much done. We're gonna go on and plant some radishes. Won't put paper over those today because we'll run out of time. I'm going to plant some radishes and carrots here, and you can imagine me putting the paper down on them. Again, you're going to want to make sure there's some slits or squares cut in the paper once you put it down, so that the little bedding plants can get out. Let's see. This is what we'll be planting today. Rainbow carrots. They're a long variety, but they're different colors. We're going to plant cherry bell radishes and a red cord chantenay carrot, which is short and fat. Those are the best kind. The reason I plant carrots, nothing tastes better than a fresh carrot. You can't get them from the grocery store and still have that good flavor. You can come close, but it's not as good as the ones you grow. So I'm going to plant radishes in this first row, and I'm going to plant carrots in the second. I have 2 packages, which is about enough for 1 row. At least the way I make the rows. I make the rows pretty big and wide. I make a lot of space between the rows. That way I can get my old carcass down there to weed. It's being hard to open. We got plenty of carrot seed here. So you want to try and sprinkle it as evenly as possible over the entire top of the row. Even. Try not to get big clumps of seed in one place. Doesn't matter if you plant it too thick, you can always dig out carrots if they're coming in too thick for you. You can't put more in once they get started. And you want to tamp them down in. Now the other half of the row are going to plant with the rainbow mix. So about half a row of each. I like the idea of white and purple carrots. It somehow sounds like it makes the salad a little more fantastic. It didn't give me near as many of these seeds, so I'm going to have to plant them just a little bit thinner. And later in the season, you'll notice that because they'll come in a lot thicker where you planted more seed. Again, you want to tamp it down good. Notice with seed this small, we don't bother to cover it. We just put it right on the surface, tamp it in. You don't have to, because it'll in nature, that's the way it does it. It doesn't require much topsoil over it. This other row over here where you have cherry bell radishes, put them in. Same way. They're a little bit bigger. But we want to cover the entire top of the row. And one package is about half a row's worth. And this other variety is called early scarlet. I like to do a half a row of each. That way, if one crop fails, I still have something growing in the row. Radishes are a good one to put in because they grow up fast, and then you still have time to plant something else in that row later on. So, tap these all in. And at this point, we have a little grub here. You don't want those in the garden. They're going to turn into beetles later on. Also attract moles and voles, which are another garden pest. That's what Wookie the Wonder Dog's job is to catch those things and eat them. And she and her man dog, Kodiak, love them. They eat them just like Twinkies. It's kind of gross, but hey, that's nature. Okay, so we have food prepared for all of those. We're going to water in the seed right away. Whenever I plant new seed, I use humic acid, which helps germination rates. See that? I use fish fertilizer for micronutrient. And always a slow release fertilizer. Osmocote's a good one. There's others like Anderson's tree fertilizer. What other? Sean, help me out here. Well, I have it in my notes. It's posted on for last week's show. But there's several good ones. What you're mostly looking for are fertilizers that have a higher percentage of slow release nitrate. Osmocote's one I tend to be able to find anywhere. So pretend these two rows have already gotten their paper on them. I'm not going to spend forever just putting down paper. I think you got the idea. You want to water thoroughly with the special mix to help get the seed started. Then you can put the hose on it later and water it heavier. But you want to make sure you get the micronutrients and the stimulus to the roots going on the seed. You want to water whenever the ground starts to dry out. You should never let the seed dry out after you plant it. Once the plants start coming up, that's a different story. Then you can cut back on the watering a lot. But right after they're planted, they need to stay wet all the time. This is probably a little bit too little water to get them started. And I will be putting the hose on them after the show. After I get all this other stuff out of the way so I don't get it all wet. And I also want to put paper down on these. And don't forget, whenever you plant, use a good slow release fertilizer. In this case, the Osmocote. Have some here in a jar. I'm going to sprinkle a little on top of here for both rows. Don't worry about burning the plants. You just putting down a little bit. It's not going to hurt them. And babies need food, same as adults. So, to review, perlite, calcium, slow release fertilizer, fish emulsion, and a rooting hormone, okay? Humic acid. All of those should be included along with your seed. And then to stop the weeds, we put down paper and straw. Shine. So our last shot of the day is the Fallow Garden, which is about twice to 3 times as big as the garden I'm going to grow this year. Last year, it got way ahead of me. And anybody can garden in the spring, but gardening in July separates the wheat from the chaff. Over here you see I got a gardening table. It's all set up with pots for me to plant things in. Most of them have no seed in them yet. We're still getting temperatures in the low 30s at night here, and that will prevent seed from germinating unless it's a cold season plant like a cabbage or kohlrabi or Brussels sprouts. You can be planting those now. Those tend to do poorly in the summertime. So what you do with those is you plant them in a shady part of the garden in the afternoon. This part right over here always gets afternoon shade, which is where I plant my cabbages. And they'll kind of do poorly in the middle of summertime and then revive in the fall, and you'll get nice heads of cabbage that way. But mostly last year I grew weeds. I could not keep up with them, working 2 jobs. It just was a bit much. This year I'm going to downsize the garden. That way I can weed it better. And this part I'm going to let go fallow. I'm going to concentrate on killing off the Johnson grass that grows over here, and letting the compost rot and the earthworms grow and get happy. And next year this will be a kick butt garden over here. It's a good idea to let it go fallow once in a while anyway, because you're depleting minerals from the soil. But certainly if you can add compost to that, it will help. So a quick story before you go. Father O'Toole decided to step in at the local pub to see how many of his parishioners were in there. And he went in, and sure enough, every single man in the room was in his congregation. So he said in a very loud voice, "All right, how many of you want to go to heaven? Stand up." Well, every man in the room stood up, hat in hand, except one, Murphy, over in the corner. Father O'Toole looked over at Murphy and said, "Murphy, don't tell me you don't want to go to heaven someday." Murphy jumped to his feet, grabbed his hat. "Oh, I'm sorry, Father. I thought you were getting an expedition to go right now." Well, happy gardening, people. Hope that your garden is starting off as good as mine, and I hope it'll stay that way.